Based on a true story.
This was so much fun. I'm glad you came. Thanks for inviting me, but don't phrase it like that. By the way, you didn't talk about where you're from. Oh, I rarely discuss biology at parties. I mean, I assume Canada, but what city? I'm actually not from Canada. No, I'm from... Don't say it. The US?
I'm sure you know that America's global reputation has collapsed recently, but have you ever wondered how the rest of the world actually treats Americans now? Do they just silently dislike us, or are Americans facing something more dangerous when they travel abroad? As an American who's now doing a PhD in Asia and has lived in Europe, I'm going to share the 3 major eras of treatment I've experienced abroad and let you know what's changed and what to watch out for as a US citizen when leaving the country. In the late 2000s, I was a student ambassador in the People to People program, which President Eisenhower launched as a diplomatic alternative to war, and why the US wasn't involved in military conflicts from 1956 until the program shut down in 2015. Me and 30 other hand-picked middle school students patriotically coerced our teachers and grandmothers into buying Dunkin' Donuts coupons to fund a 3-week trip around Europe, where our mission was to surround Parisians on the street until they agreed that George Bush was a great president. No, I mean, there's only so much you can expect from a group of 12-year-olds, right? We mostly did touristy stuff, like guided tours and visiting castles under the guise of cross-cultural exchange. But we were told incessantly, you represent America. Behave like an ambassador. Though, could a horde of pubescent middle schoolers truly enhance America's global reputation? By sharing stories of daily life in America, were we able to, like Eisenhower wanted, foster diplomacy? No, we could not. But this was a different time. You couldn't just go on TikTok or X and get a glimpse of life in another country. Smartphones weren't even really a thing yet. Meeting a foreigner still felt like a rare opportunity to learn about the world. And what I noticed surprised me. Many of the places we visited treated us with open disdain. You Americans, with your large coffees and your freedom toast. You'll never understand what life's really about. I'm 11. It wasn't just sideways glances and snickering. I was used to that from the girls in my class. People demonstrably did not want us there. I remember trying to purchase a classic French souvenir in Paris, and the cashier vigorously shook her head and waved me away, refusing to check me out. I probably shouldn't have tried to pay in pounds for a cigarette. But still, this contempt wasn't everywhere. Some places were incredibly hospitable and excited to ask about life in the US. Do you really have queen bees in high school and buy guns at Walmart? Do you have cowboys? But I left the trip confused because I grew up hearing that the US was the greatest country on earth, and everyone thought so. I was fortunate to be born there. People who didn't like me because I was American were jealous of my freedom. They don't have freedom in their country, you'd go to jail for speaking your mind. So what was the real reason behind so much antipathy for a boisterous group of middle schoolers drenched in Axe deodorant wearing berets and I Heart London shirts? A veritable mystery. Well, one explanation was the Iraq War, which was profoundly unpopular in Europe. The US conducted it without UN Security Council authorization and over many objections from European countries. England, the US's closest European ally, barely had a favorable view of America at the time, and George Bush was perceived as a parody of a leader, a rootin' cowboy who couldn't read. Thankfully, that never happened to an American president again. Americans were seen as arrogant and ignorant. We couldn't have told you who the Prime Minister of the Netherlands was or gave a but Dutch people sure as hell knew the US president. This is when I learned that some Americans travel with maple leaf bags and backpacks to pretend to be Canadian, which, solid tip. Because in Europe, we represented the wealthiest, most powerful country on the planet that didn't want anyone to forget it. This is era 1. I don't know, the Bush era. And despite what I said, we as individuals were not necessarily culpable for US foreign policy. People in Belgium might have thought we were annoying, but they didn't blame a bunch of middle schoolers for going to war in Iraq. As you'll see later, this isn't always the case. But in the mid to late 2000s, you didn't have to take anti-Americanism personally. It was just an easy punchline. I mean, anti-Americanism has probably been an easy punchline in Europe since before I was born. It's their go-to. I heard even a German once frowned slightly less when his coworker called America the land of the free, home of the cheeseburgers. Haha. But when Obama was elected, everything changed about being an American in Europe. I studied abroad in undergrad. Actually, several. I lived in Sweden during the academic year and the Czech Republic over the summer, and I never failed to let someone know I was from the US. Being an American in the mid-2010s, I got a lot of popularity and interest based on America's soft power. People learned English through Hollywood movies and American TV shows. People thought American universities were the best. People liked American rap and hip-hop. And kinda unlike the first time I was in Europe, English proficiency was high basically everywhere. It was cool to speak English. When I told people I was from the US, it was like throwing a hot steak at a malnourished dog. Oh, really? Where? What city? What's it like? Pooping was harder than being popular as an American abroad. Which I'm reading for millennials may actually be true for many things. Eat a vegetable, guys. Europe also thought Obama was cool. They applauded Americans for electing a liberal black man as president. He was well-spoken and charismatic. Gay marriage was legalized, which scored a lot of points in Europe. I was trying to think of stories that exemplified why being an American was playing on easy mode at this time, and I came up with two. First, I was an exchange student in Sweden from September to May, or whatever, on a student visa, but I wanted to spend the summer, I mean, honestly, around, but let's say facilitating further cultural enrichment before I had to go back to the US. I asked some immigration agency whether I could change my visa from a student visa to a tourist visa in Sweden, and they said no, you have to leave the Schengen area, which is like basically every country in Europe except England and Norway, then re-enter as a tourist. So I took a quick trip and did that. Now coming back at immigration, there's this kid, looks like it's his first job out of college, who asked for my passport, and there's a minor line behind me. Not so much that you would expect they would need or want to rush. Now he starts asking me what I'm doing and where I'm going, probably what they instructed him to do in training. And his supervisor comes over and points at my passport and says,
"He's American. What are you doing? Let him through. Don't ask unnecessary questions."
And the kid sheepishly hands me my passport like a puppy that peed on the floor and got hit with a newspaper, doesn't say anything, and waves me past. Now apply that vibe to like everything. Not only did playing the dumb American card get you out of basically any trouble, you were unlikely to get in trouble to begin with because you had an American passport. Second story, I was on a train to Prague, a city I really like, but a group of f***os was sitting in front of me, being loud and belligerent. Maybe they were drunk. That would actually check out. Check out. Anyway, as we're getting off, one of them says something in Czech to me, so I didn't understand it, but he sounded aggressive, and I responded, sorry, I only speak English, and their demeanor changed instantly. Their tough guy faces disappeared, and he asked me, "Where are you from?" I said, "The US." They immediately started talking to me in English. "What city are you from? How long are you in Prague? What have you done in the Czech Republic?" They literally carried my bag for me, which now would mean I was getting robbed, and gave me a bunch of recommendations for things to do in Prague, like they weren't crossing their throats at an old woman on the train 5 minutes earlier. That was what it was like being an American during this golden era. It was great. As always, there are exceptions. A Swede once asked me, "How do you personally feel about 9/11 because your country kind of deserved it?" So I told him my whole family was taking a trip to New York on the plane that crashed to visit my other family that worked in the Twin Towers, which isn't true, or even possible. The planes were going to California, but that ended the conversation pretty quickly. And I can make a whole video on Europe's widespread, in my opinion, misplaced, provincial pride or disdain for anything that originates more than like 3 miles from where they were born. Sorry, that was probably triggering. 5 kilometers. I mean, go ask that same Swede how they feel about Norwegians or Danes and maybe you wouldn't feel offended. But even people like that guy, who had problems with the US government, could mostly separate the citizenry from the state. As a college student, I didn't get blamed for drone strikes in the Middle East. So, moving to now, what the hell happened? And what is it like today? On his travel show, Conan O'Brien went to Greenland in 2019, the first time Trump said he was going to buy Greenland, and made exaggeratedly arrogant jokes to the people of Greenland about buying it almost with impunity. I like Conan O'Brien. This is not a criticism. From what I have seen, his travel segments are well-meaning. But if you watch that same humor now, it feels different. And that sentiment is the essence of what's changed. America buying Greenland or making Canada the 51st state a decade ago would have been like good-natured banter that didn't seriously offend anyone, like how all Americans are fat and illiterate and eat McDonald's. Today, the separation between people and government has started eroding for Americans, and it's salient in our experience abroad. It's not just jokes anymore. People really have to question, like, do American citizens want to invade my country? And they're pissed. You don't need a 45-minute section about all the ways America has undermined its own power and influence, so I'll just give a very brief summary. You know, Trump's second term showed unprecedented territorial aggression from the US. We engaged in trade wars with allies. We withdrew from important organizations and agreements. The NATO Security General called Trump daddy. Actually, that was probably a good thing. I mean, it's a full-time job keeping track of all the ways America is pissing off its allies. Why couldn't Trump shut the f up about invading Greenland? Which, for reasons outside the scope of this video, would have been the stupidest move of his presidency and why it didn't happen, but he just kept saying it and raising the threats. And now you have countries looking in like, well, why isn't anyone stopping this? Do Americans not care? Which eventually transforms into Americans only care about themselves or their bank accounts. They have no morals. I hate them. In 2025, US global approval ratings fell below China for the first time in 2 decades. US favorability in Mexico collapsed from 61% in 2024 to 29% in 2025. Canada dropped from 51% to 34%. Japan, one of, if not the biggest fans of America in the world, dropped from 70% to 55%. So what does this mean for Americans abroad? Well, you're now one of the bad guys. When you tell someone you're from the US, usually the best response you'll get is them going, oh, dejectedly, and changing the topic. I actually did a friend of a favor recently, and they were incredibly appreciative and happy until they asked where I was from. Then they got cold and silent, and I was like, what the f? I literally just helped you as a person, not an American. Some people will ask you to defend policy or something the Trump administration said. Some people will tell you why they dislike America, but you don't get the, that's so cool, tell me more response. As an American in a university setting, I'm kind of the whipping boy in class for geopolitical events, like talking about tariffs or Iran. There's a professor here who invariably criticizes the US regardless of the topic. We could be talking about the effects of AI energy demands, and they'd say, well, America's fine destroying the planet. I mean, they elected Trump. Then stare at me like I'm supposed to respond with something. I don't think you're in more danger traveling abroad as an American now unless you seek it out. At the end of the day, people are people, you know, like think of the country you hate the most. Are you going to confront someone on the street who's from that country? Probably not. But the vibes have changed. I saw this article from a year ago saying that the vast majority of experienced travelers believed US tourists would be perceived more negatively, and some were already reporting anti-American hostility overseas. In my experience, that hostility depends on where you are. Some places still really like Americans. But now we have experts advising Americans to keep a low profile and proactively state, I'm a tourist. I don't speak for my government, which isn't bad advice, but wasn't always strictly necessary. Now, none of this is a uniquely American experience. I've heard Japanese professors say they felt ashamed about the actions of Prime Minister Takaichi and her supporters. A visiting scholar from Israel said that she felt compelled to apologize for her country. An expat from Russia told me he doesn't advertise where he's from. There will always be citizens who disagree with their country's politics, and some people have been embarrassed by their country for much longer than America. What sucks as an American abroad is you're watching US power from institutions, economic systems, soft power, etc., that took decades to build, get dismantled almost overnight, and there's not much you can do about it. I wasn't abroad during Trump's first term, but I heard from friends that they got leeway, and sometimes even pity, because no one thought it could happen. All the news channels were reporting Clinton would win. One term could have been a fluke, but a second term is a deliberate choice. In an increasingly nationalist and online world, people are forgetting the we know you're not your government social contract. You know, when I go on Reddit, well, I regret it. But I've recently seen several threads that ask, why aren't Americans doing anything about what's happening in the US right now? And a lot of the comments are like, all Americans are at fault. Americans should be engaging in violent protests. If this happened in France, the government would never get away with it. We need another French Revolution. We've had to hear about the Second Amendment for so long and how school were inevitable, and yet Americans aren't like gunning people down in the street. The internet does not mirror real life, but I think this reflects the collapse of the separation between citizens and government. These comments reflect a profound frustration with the state of the world and a feeling of powerlessness that is understandable. A lot of people think the old system is broken, and in that system, America was the top dog. In the new system, That said, the people who push for another French Revolution often forget about the Reign of Terror, and I even see some Americans getting more comfortable with the idea of political violence being the solution because everything feels so broken. But if that's you, I encourage you to think again. Anyway, should you still go abroad as an American now? Is it safe? Yeah. Is it always pleasant? No. But we're not the first or last country that has had to navigate a terrible reputation. I probably wouldn't be an asshole, because you're going to get way less grace than you used to. But now is also a particularly good opportunity to demonstrate that you can read above a 4th grade level to Europeans. If you made it to the end and you're not subscribed, why not? Also, click the link in the description and follow my Instagram. I have like no followers and it's sad and pathetic. See you next time.